Let's go over the details of collecting your UV visible spectrum. You're going to need a few things, including the sample you prepared for IR, your clean solvent from the IR experiment, an extra beaker for waste, some cuvettes, which your TA will supply, and Kim wipes. Let's start by setting up the experiment on the computer. We'll go to the workstation computer and open the scan program, which is right on the desktop. Once you've got the program open, we'll need to set up the experiment to be sure that we're collecting across the proper wavelengths for this particular lab. So go over to the Setup tab and confirm that you're going from 800 nanometers to 400 nanometers so that we'll only be looking at the visible spectrum. You may also want to change from survey to fastest. That tends to give a better spectrum. And set your baseline so that you can collect a baseline, and the software will then subtract that and give you a better result. Next, you'll need to prepare a blank. Because we're using baseline correction, we'll need a blank. So we're going to use pure solvent to show the instrument what that solvent looks like and have that subtracted from our spectrum. We'll begin by rinsing one of the quartz cuvettes using your blank solution. Be careful when you do this because you don't want to scratch the quartz cuvettes, and the glass pipette is able to do this if you press too hard against them. Once you've rinsed it out a bit, take a Kim wipe and wipe the clear sides of the cuvette to be sure that there are no smudges on the outside that could adversely affect your experiment. Next, we're going to add the blank solution to the clean cuvette. You want that solution to be at least 2/3 the height of the cuvette to be sure that the light beam that's being used for analysis is going through your actual solvent and not the air in the headspace above it. So this should be plenty right here. Now, with this blank prepared, we're ready to do our baseline so that the instrument can subtract it later from our results. Let's blank the instrument now using that blank that we created. We'll slide the compartment cover back, placing the cuvette containing our blank solution into the holder. Now notice that the clear transparent sides are pointed left to right, and that the ground translucent sides are front to back. At this point, we're ready to blank the instrument. So we'll go down to the baseline and click OK. The sample is now running an experiment on that solvent and determining exactly what the transmittance of that solvent is, and then setting it to 100%. Now we will remove that blank, and we're ready to empty our cuvette, reload our new test solution, and get our spectrum. So let's prepare our sample so that we can collect a spectrum. To prepare the sample, we'll take our cuvette and of course pour out the blank solution. Next, I'm going to add just a drop or two of the solution used in the IR experiment. This is because I don't want the sample to be nearly as concentrated for this. Once I've done that, I'm then going to take my clean pipette and use it to add more of my assigned solvent. This will dilute the sample so that it's not too dark, so dark that the experiment in the UV won't work. So I'll add a little bit of solvent here, being sure to aspirate a bit so that it's nice and well mixed. And notice when I hold this up to a white Kim wipe that you can see it's only very slightly colored. Now let's collect our spectrum using the sample that we created. Of course, to begin, we'll need to open the cover and place the sample into the UV spectrometer with the transparent sides facing left to right. Then we close the cover and go to the software, where we'll begin the experiment by clicking on the Start button. If you're the first student of the day, you'll be prompted to give a file name. This name will store all the data for the entire lab session, so be sure that you give it an appropriate name. Next, you'll be asked to label your sample with a name that you can identify as your own. After clicking OK, the experiment will begin, and you'll be able to watch your spectrum collect in real time. Here I've grabbed the bar to drag down my information window so I can see the spectrum a bit better. Now your spectrum is going to be a little bit more interesting than mine because I'm not using the compounds from this experiment. Finally, it's time to clean up after the experiment. We'll start by retrieving our sample from the instrument and closing the cover to be sure that dust doesn't accumulate inside the compartment. Next, I'm going to dump that sample into my waste beaker and rinse the cuvette several times using a few aliquots of my clean solvent. Notice that when I do this, I'm very careful not to let the pipette touch against the walls of the cuvette and potentially scratch them. After about 3 aliquots have been added and dumped out, the cuvette can be considered clean. We'll wipe down the outsides to make sure there are no smudges for the next person who uses this cuvette. And we're done cleaning up, and we're now ready to hand the instrument off to the next student.